Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez had always been the kind of person who stayed up late, staring at the stars. As a space scientist working for the government's special research team, she spent most nights at the remote desert station in Chile, listening to radio signals from deep space. It was lonely work, but Eleanor loved it. She had dedicated her life to finding proof that we weren't alone in the universe. That Tuesday night started like any other. Eleanor sat in front of her computer screens, adjusting the giant radio telescopes that pointed toward the dark sky. The desert around her was completely silent except for the quiet humming of her equipment. She had been doing this same routine for 8 months now, and honestly, she was getting tired of hearing nothing but empty space static. But then something changed. Around 2:30 in the morning, her equipment picked up a signal that made her heart race. It wasn't the usual random noise from distant stars. This signal had a pattern, almost like it was trying to communicate. Even stranger, when Eleanor adjusted her equipment settings, the signal seemed to respond, changing its rhythm as if it knew someone was listening. Eleanor felt goosebumps all over her arms. In all her years of searching for alien life, she had never seen anything like this. She quickly started recording everything, her fingers shaking as she typed notes on her computer. The signal continued for 20 minutes, then suddenly stopped, leaving only silence. Her mind was racing with possibilities. She needed fresh air to think clearly. Eleanor stepped outside the small research building and looked up at the star-filled sky. The desert night was beautiful but cold, and she pulled her jacket tight around herself. That's when she saw it. A soft, glowing light was moving slowly behind the rocky hills about a mile away. At first, Eleanor thought it might be a helicopter or maybe some kind of military aircraft. But this light moved as smoothly, to silently. It seemed to float rather than fly, pulsing with colors she had never seen before. Eleanor knew she should probably stay at the station and report what she was seeing to her supervisors. That would be the smart, safe thing to do. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She had spent her entire career dreaming of a moment like this. If there was even a small chance that this light was connected to the mysterious signal, she couldn't just watch from a distance. She grabbed a flashlight and started walking toward the hills. The desert ground was rough and rocky, and several times she almost tripped in the darkness. As she got closer, the light became brighter and more defined. It wasn't just a simple light anymore. Eleanor could see that it was coming from some kind of craft, unlike anything humans had ever built. The object was about the size of a small house, but its shape kept changing slightly, as if it were alive. The surface looked smooth and organic, covered with patterns that glowed in waves of blue, green, and purple light. It reminded Eleanor of the way jellyfish move in the ocean. Beautiful and mysterious. Her scientific training told her to be careful, but her heart was pounding with excitement. This was the discovery she had dreamed about her whole life. She was looking at proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth. The craft was sitting in a small valley between two hills, completely silent. Eleanor crouched behind some rocks about 50 feet away, watching and trying to understand what she was seeing. The glowing patterns on its surface seemed to pulse in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Then something incredible happened. A section of the craft began to open, but not like a door or window. Instead, it unfolded like flower petals, revealing a soft golden light from inside. Eleanor held her breath, not knowing what to expect. A figure stepped out of the opening, and Eleanor's world changed forever. The being was tall, probably about 7 feet, with a graceful way of moving that seemed almost like dancing. Its skin had a pale, pearl-like quality that seemed to glow softly in the darkness. But what struck Eleanor most were its eyes. They were large and expressive, filled with an intelligence that felt both ancient and kind. When the being turned and looked directly at Eleanor, she felt something she had never experienced before. It was as if this creature could see not just her body, but her thoughts, her dreams, and her deepest feelings. Instead of feeling scared, Eleanor felt strangely peaceful, like she was looking at an old friend she had forgotten about. The being's gaze held hers for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. In that time, Eleanor felt a connection. that went beyond words or language. She sensed that this creature was as curious about her as she was about it. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the being stepped back into the craft. The opening closed like flower petals folding up, and the entire object began to rise silently into the air. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the starry sky, leaving Elena alone in the desert valley. Elena stood there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Had she really seen an alien spacecraft? Had she actually made eye contact with a being from another world? Part of her wondered if she was losing her mind, but the memory felt too real, too vivid to be a dream or hallucination. When she finally walked back to the research station, Elena's legs felt weak and her hands were still shaking. She sat down at her computer and stared at the screens, but she couldn't focus on her work anymore. Everything had changed in those few minutes. She was no longer just a scientist searching for alien life. She was someone who had actually found it. Elena spent the rest of the night writing down every detail she could remember about the encounter. She described the craft, the being, and especially those incredible eyes that seemed to look directly into her soul. But she also knew that she couldn't tell anyone about what had happened, at least not yet. Who would believe such an incredible story? As the sun began to rise over the desert, Elena finally tried to get some sleep. But even with her eyes closed, she could still see those mysterious, intelligent eyes looking at her with what seemed like kindness and understanding. She had no idea that this was just the beginning of an adventure that would change not only her life, but potentially the future of humanity itself. 3 weeks had passed since Elena's encounter in the desert, but she couldn't stop thinking about those mysterious eyes every night when she tried to sleep. Vivid dreams filled her mind with images that felt more real than her waking life. These weren't ordinary dreams. They were like watching movies of distant worlds, filled with colors and landscapes that didn't exist on Earth. In her dreams, she saw vast cities made of crystal that sparkled under purple skies. She watched beings similar to the one she had met, moving gracefully through gardens filled with plants that glowed like stars. The architecture was unlike anything human, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like living trees, reaching toward twin suns that painted everything in golden light. But what disturbed Elena most was how tired she felt during the day. Her colleagues at the research station started noticing changes in her behavior. Dr. Martinez, the station director, called her into his office after she fell asleep at her desk for the 3rd time that week. "Elena, I'm worried about you," he said, his voice filled with genuine concern. "You look exhausted, and your work isn't up to your usual standards. Is everything okay at home?" Elena wanted to tell him the truth, but how could she explain that? She was having dreams about alien worlds. Instead, she just nodded and promised to get more rest. But rest was impossible when every time she closed her eyes, those incredible visions returned. The dreams became more detailed each night. She began to recognize specific places and even individual beings. There was one particular figure that appeared often, always watching her from a distance. Elena couldn't see the face clearly, but something about the way this being moved reminded her of the creature she had encountered in the desert. During her lunch breaks, Elena started spending time in the station's small library, researching similar experiences. She found old books and articles about people who claimed to have had contact with beings from other worlds. Most of these stories were dismissed as fantasy or mental illness, but Elena noticed patterns that made her heart race. Many of the accounts described beings with large, expressive eyes and the ability to communicate through thoughts rather than words. Several people mentioned having vivid dreams after their encounters, dreams that felt like visits to other worlds. Elena realized she wasn't going crazy. She was experiencing something that had happened to others before her. She began keeping a detailed journal, writing down every dream and every strange feeling she experienced. The more she wrote, the more she noticed that the dreams seemed to be trying to tell her something important. The alien world she saw in her sleep was beautiful, but there were signs that something was wrong. In some dreams, Elena saw areas where the crystal cities were crumbling and the glowing plants were withering away. She watched as the twin suns in the sky grew dimmer, and she felt a sense of sadness that seemed to come from the beings themselves. It was as if their entire world was slowly dying, and they were desperately searching for hope. One evening, while researching online in her small apartment, Elena discovered something that changed everything. She found a private forum where people shared experiences they couldn't discuss anywhere else. These weren't crazy people or attention seekers. Many were scientists, doctors, and other professionals who had encountered something beyond normal human experience. Elena spent hours reading their stories, and tears came to her eyes when she realized how similar their experiences were to her own. A retired pilot named Rodriguez described dreams of flying through star systems she had never seen. A marine biologist called Thompson wrote about underwater visions of creatures that didn't exist in Earth's oceans. A university professor named Chen shared dreams of libraries containing knowledge that humanity hadn't discovered yet. But what really caught Elena's attention was a message from someone who called themselves Desert Watcher. This person described an encounter in Chile that was almost identical to Elena's experience. The same type of craft, the same mysterious being with incredible eyes, and the same life-changing connection that lasted only minutes but felt eternal. Elena spent 3 days working up the courage to send a private message to Desert Watcher. When she finally did, the response came within hours. The person behind the username was Dr. David Chen, a former NASA researcher who had been studying similar encounters for over a decade. David explained that there were more people like them than Elena could imagine, scattered around the world, all connected by experiences that science couldn't explain. He invited her to join a small, private group that met once a month through secure video calls to share their experiences and try to understand what was happening to them. Elena's first meeting with the group was both terrifying and comforting. There were 12 people from different countries and backgrounds, but they all had the same look in their eyes. It was the look of people who had seen something that changed their understanding of reality forever. During that first call, Elena learned that her dreams weren't unique. Almost everyone in the group was experiencing similar visions of the dying world. With the crystal cities and twin suns, they were all seeing the same beings, the same landscapes, and the same sense of urgent sadness. Dr. Chen had a theory that shocked Elena to her core. He believed that these dreams weren't just random images created by their minds. He thought they were actual communications from the beings they had encountered, a way of sharing information across the vast distances of space. Think about it, David said during one of their calls. If you wanted to communicate with a species that didn't have the technology for space travel, how would you do it? You might try to connect with their minds directly, sharing images and emotions that transcend language barriers. Elena started paying even closer attention to her dreams after that conversation. She began to notice that the beings in her visions seemed to be showing her specific things. They would point to dying areas of their world, then look directly at her with expressions of hope and desperation. The most powerful dream came on a Friday night, exactly 1 month after her desert encounter. In this vision, Elena found herself standing in what looked like a council chamber made entirely of glowing crystal. Dozens of the mysterious beings sat in a circle around her, their large eyes focused on her face. One of them approached her, and Elena's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the same graceful movements, an intelligent gaze from her desert encounter. Without speaking, this being placed a hand on Elena's forehead, and suddenly her mind was filled with images and emotions that weren't her own. She saw their planet as it once was, thriving and beautiful, filled with life and wonder. Then she witnessed its slow decline as their suns began to fade and their resources became scarce. She felt their desperation as they searched the galaxy for a new home, and their careful observation of Earth as a possible refuge. But most importantly, Elena felt their loneliness. These beings had been traveling through space for generations, watching distant worlds and dreaming of finding others who might understand them. When the being touched her mind in that dream, Elena realized that her encounter in the desert hadn't been random. She had been chosen for something much bigger than herself. Elena woke from that dream with tears on her face and a certainty in her heart that would change her life forever. The beings weren't just trying to communicate with her, they were asking for her help, and somehow, Elena knew that everything she had experienced was preparing her for a choice that would determine the fate of two worlds. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to return to the desert valley, where everything had started. 3 months had passed since her first encounter, and the dreams had become so vivid that she sometimes felt more awake while sleeping than during her regular day. Her new friends in the online group encouraged her to trust her instincts, especially Dr. Chen, who believed that the beings were trying to guide her toward another meeting. This time, Elena was prepared. She packed a small backpack with recording equipment, including a digital camera, a voice recorder, and a notebook with pencils. She also brought a simple calculator and some basic math books, thinking that numbers might be a universal language that could help her communicate with the mysterious visitor. Elena told her supervisor that she needed to do some field research in the desert, which wasn't entirely untrue. Dr. Martinez was still worried about her recent behavior, but he trusted her scientific judgment enough to approve a 3-day research trip. Elena felt guilty about not telling him the complete truth, but she knew he would never believe the real reason for her journey. The drive to the valley took 2 hours on rough desert roads as Elena parked her Jeep in the same spot as before. She felt her heart beating faster with excitement and nervousness. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. She had learned from her dreams that the beings preferred to meet during the quiet hours, between day and night. Elena set up a small camp with a folding chair and arranged her equipment on a blanket. Then she waited, watching the sky as stars began to appear one by one. Hours passed, and doubt started creeping into her mind. Maybe she had imagined everything. Maybe the dreams were just her brain's way of dealing with loneliness and stress. But just as she was considering packing up and going home, a familiar glow appeared on the horizon. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she watched the same organic-looking craft descend silently into the valley. This time, however, something was different. The craft landed much closer to her, only about 20 feet away, as if its pilot was no longer afraid of frightening her. The opening unfolded just as Elena remembered, like flower petals revealing a golden interior. But instead of staying near the craft, the tall, graceful being walked directly toward Elena with confident, flowing movements. Elena stood up slowly, trying to control her trembling hands as the being approached. Elena could see details she had missed during their first brief encounter. The creature's skin had a subtle pattern of light lines that pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat made visible. Its clothing, if it could be called that, seemed to be made of the same organic material as the spacecraft, shifting colors in harmony with the being's movements. But it was the eyes that captured Elena completely. They were even more expressive than she remembered, filled with an intelligence that seemed ancient yet somehow familiar. When the being looked at Elena, she felt that same overwhelming sense of recognition, as if she were meeting someone she had known her entire life. To Elena's amazement, the being began to communicate without speaking. Images and concepts flowed into her mind, not as dreams this time, but as clear, direct thoughts. Elena learned that this method of communication was natural for the being's species, who had evolved beyond the need for spoken language thousands of years ago. The first thing Elena understood was the being's name, or at least the closest human equivalent, the concept that entered her mind translated roughly as Lightbringer or Dawnwalker. But Elena found herself thinking of the being as Luna because of the gentle, moonlight glow of her skin. Luna began sharing information about her people and their desperate situation. Elena saw images of their dying world, where the twin suns that had sustained life for millions of years were slowly burning out. The crystal cities she had seen in her dreams were real, but many were already abandoned as the planet grew colder and darker each year. Luna's people were not conquerors or invaders. They were explorers and scientists, much like Elena herself, who had spent generations searching for worlds where their species might survive. They had been observing Earth for over 300 years, learning human languages and customs while being careful not to interfere with natural development. Elena felt honored but also overwhelmed when Luna explained why she had been chosen for contact. Luna's people could sense the electrical patterns in living beings' brains, and Elena's pattern indicated someone with both scientific curiosity and genuine compassion. These qualities were essential for what Luna hoped to accomplish. Elena pulled out her notebook and pen, and Luna watched with fascination as she began drawing simple mathematical equations in the sand. Luna immediately understood and began creating her own symbols, showing Elena concepts that human science hadn't discovered. Yet, they spent over an hour communicating through mathematics, sharing ideas about physics, astronomy, and the nature of consciousness itself. Luna showed Elena how her spacecraft worked, using principles that combined technology with biology in ways that seemed like magic. The craft was actually a living organism, genetically modified over thousands of years to serve as both transportation and companion. It could repair itself, adapt to different environments, and even reproduce when necessary. As their communication deepened, Elena began to understand the true purpose of Luna's mission. Her people weren't just looking for a new planet to colonize. They were seeking to establish peaceful contact with humanity, hoping to share knowledge and resources that could benefit both species. Luna explained that Earth was unique. Among the thousands of worlds they had explored, not only did it have the right environment to support life, but its dominant species, humans, showed the same curiosity and creativity that Luna's people valued above all else. They believed that working together, the two species could solve problems that neither could handle alone. But Luna also shared her fears. Her people's governing council was divided about how to proceed. Some believed that humans were too primitive and aggressive to be trusted with advanced technology. Others worried that revealing themselves would cause panic and violence, making cooperation impossible. Luna belonged to a smaller group that believed direct, careful contact with selected humans was the best approach. Elena was part of an experiment to see if genuine friendship and understanding could develop between individuals from the two species. As dawn approached, Luna prepared to leave, but she did something unexpected. She reached out and gently touched Elena's hand with her own. The physical contact created an even stronger mental connection, and Elena experienced a flood of emotions from Luna's mind. She felt Luna's loneliness during her long journey through space, her hope for her people's survival, and her growing affection for the curious human scientists who had shown such courage and openness. Elena realized that Luna was taking enormous personal risks by continuing these meetings, going against the direct orders of her superiors who preferred to observe from a distance. Before returning to her craft, Luna shared one final, crucial piece of information. She would return one more time in exactly 7 days. But this meeting would be different. Luna would have to make a decision about her people's future relationship with humanity, and she wanted Elena to be part of that choice. Elena watched the craft disappear into the morning sky, her mind racing with everything she had learned. She was no longer just a scientist who had encountered alien life. She had become Earth's first unofficial ambassador to another species, carrying the hopes and fears of two civilizations that were more alike than different. As Elena drove back to the research station, she knew that the next 7 days would be the most important week in human history. The choice that Luna would present to her wouldn't just affect their personal relationship, but could determine whether humanity would face the future alone or with powerful allies among the stars. The 7 days that followed Elena's second encounter with Luna felt like the longest week of her life. Every morning she woke up wondering if she had dreamed the entire experience. But the detailed notes in her journal and the mathematical equations, still drawn in the desert sand, proved that everything had been real. Elena found it almost impossible to concentrate on her regular work. Her colleagues noticed that she seemed distracted and anxious, often staring out the window at the sky as if she was waiting for something important to happen. Dr. Martinez called her into his office again, this time with more serious concerns about her performance. Elena, I've known you for 5 years, and you've always been one of our most dedicated researchers, he said, leaning back in his chair with a worried expression. But lately, You seem like you're somewhere else entirely. Your reports are late. You're making basic mistakes in your calculations. And yesterday I found you crying in the equipment room. What's going on? Elena wanted desperately to tell him the truth. The weight of keeping such an incredible secret was crushing her. But she knew that revealing Luna's existence before the time was right could ruin everything. Instead, she made up a story about personal problems at home and promised to do better. But the real problem wasn't her work performance. Elena was terrified about what Luna might ask of her during their final meeting. The telepathic connection they had shared revealed that Luna's people were facing a crisis that went beyond just finding a new home. Their entire civilization was running out of time, and desperate decisions were being made by leaders who had never directly interacted with humans. Elena's dreams during that week were different from before. Instead of seeing beautiful alien worlds, she experienced Luna's memories directly. She felt what it was like to grow up on a dying planet, watching the twin suns grow dimmer each year. She experienced Luna's training as both a scientist and a diplomat, preparing for the dangerous mission to make contact with unknown species across the galaxy. Most disturbing of all, Elena felt Luna's loneliness. Despite being surrounded by her own people, Luna was isolated by the enormous responsibility she carried. She was one of only 12 individuals chosen to make direct contact with humans, and the failure of her mission could mean the extinction of her entire species. Through these shared memories, Elena learned that Luna held a special position among her people. She wasn't just a scientist or explorer, but something closer to what humans would call a princess or queen. Her decisions carried weight with the governing council, and her personal recommendation about humanity would influence whether her people chose cooperation or continued their search elsewhere. Elena also discovered something that made her heart race with both excitement and fear. Luna's people possessed technology that could extend human lifespans by hundreds of years. They had mastered genetic medicine that could prevent aging and cure diseases that Earth's doctors couldn't even diagnose. But this knowledge came with a price that few humans would be willing to pay. On the 6th day, Elena received an unexpected visitor at the research station. Dr. Chen, the former NASA researcher from her online support group, arrived without warning, claiming he was in the area for other research. But Elena could see the worry in his eyes during their private conversation. Something big is happening, David told her as they walked outside the station building. Our entire group has been having intense dreams this week, all involving the same dying planet you've described. But more importantly, several of us have been contacted directly by the beings we encountered years ago. They're all saying the same thing. Elena, time is running out, and decisions are being made that will affect the future of both species. David revealed that he had been in contact with government officials who were aware of the alien presence, but had been waiting for the right moment to make official contact. That moment was approaching faster than anyone had expected, and Elena found herself at the center of events that were much bigger than her personal relationship with Luna. They're going to ask you to do something that will change your life forever. David warned her, I don't know exactly what it is, but based on the patterns we're seeing, I think they want you to serve as some kind of bridge between our species. The question is, are you prepared for what that might mean? Elena spent her last night before the meeting walking alone in the desert, trying to prepare herself for whatever Luna would ask. She thought about her life on Earth, her career, her few close friendships, and the family she rarely saw but still loved. She also thought about Luna's people facing extinction on their distant world, and the incredible opportunity for humanity to learn from a civilization far older and wiser than their own. When the time came for their final meeting, Elena returned to the valley with a heavy heart but a clear mind. She had made her decision about what she would do, no matter what Luna asked of her. But she wasn't prepared for what actually happened. When the familiar craft descended from the star-filled sky, this time, Luna emerged from the craft with obvious urgency in her movements. She approached Elena quickly, and their telepathic connection formed immediately, stronger than ever before. But instead of the usual flow of images and concepts, Luna projected pure emotion. Raw and desperate, Elena felt Luna's fear, not for herself, but for her people and for the choice she was about to present. Through their mental link, Elena understood that Luna's superiors had given her an ultimatum. She must return with a human volunteer who could serve as a permanent ambassador between the species, or her people would abandon Earth entirely and continue their search elsewhere. Luna's next words, spoken aloud for the first time in their relationship, would haunt Elena for the rest of her life. Looking directly into Elena's eyes with an expression of profound sadness and hope, Luna whispered in perfectly clear English, "Stay with me, please." Elena's heart stopped as she realized the full meaning of Luna's request. This wasn't just an invitation to visit another world or to serve as a temporary liaison. Luna was asking her to leave Earth permanently, to live among her people as they continued their journey through space, serving as humanity's first representative to an alien civilization. Luna explained through their mental connection that Elena would be given the same life-extending treatments that Luna's people used, allowing her to live for centuries while serving as a bridge between species. She would help her people understand humanity while also learning about technologies and knowledge that could eventually benefit Earth in ways Elena couldn't imagine. But the choice came with a terrible cost. Elena would have to leave everything she had ever known, everyone she had ever loved, and the planet where she was born. There would be no going back, no visits home, and no way to explain to her friends and family what had happened to her. Luna made it clear that this wasn't coercion or manipulation. Elena was completely free to refuse, and Luna would understand and respect that choice. But Luna's people would then have no choice but to continue their search elsewhere, potentially leaving humanity to face the future alone, without the knowledge and friendship that could come from contact with an advanced alien civilization. Elena asked for time to think, and Luna agreed to wait until dawn for her answer. As Elena sat alone in the desert valley, surrounded by the infinite stars, she realized that she wasn't just making a personal decision about her own life. She was potentially making a choice that would affect the future of both species, determining whether humanity would take its first steps toward joining a larger galactic community, or remain isolated on Earth. The weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable, but Elena knew that some choices are too important to be made based on personal comfort or fear. As the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon, she looked up at Luna, who was waiting patiently beside her craft, and Elena knew what her answer would be. As the first rays of sunlight painted the desert sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Elena stood up slowly and walked toward Luna. Her decision had crystallized during the long night of thinking, and she felt a strange sense of peace despite the enormous magnitude of what she was about to do. "I'll come with you," Elena said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But I have some conditions that we need to discuss." Luna's bioluminescent patterns immediately shifted to warmer, brighter colors, and Elena felt a wave of relief and joy flow through their mental connection. But Elena also sensed Luna's surprise at the mention of conditions. Through their telepathic link, Elena explained that she wasn't just agreeing to disappear forever. She wanted to help create a foundation for long-term cooperation between their species. Elena's first condition was that her time with Luna's people should be limited to 1 Earth year. During that time, she would serve as a cultural ambassador, learning about their civilization while helping them understand humanity. But after that year, she wanted to return to Earth to help establish official contact between their governments. Luna was initially concerned about this request. Her people's technology could indeed return Elena to Earth, but the governing council had expected a permanent arrangement. However, as Elena explained her reasoning through their mental connection, Luna began to understand the wisdom of the plan. Elena argued that a temporary exchange would be less threatening to both species and would allow for gradual, careful introduction of the idea of alien contact to Earth's population. She could return with undeniable proof of Luna's people's existence and their peaceful intentions, making it easier for Earth's leaders to accept the reality of the situation. Luna's second surprise came when Elena asked about bringing documentation of her experience back to Earth. Elena wanted to record everything about Luna's civilization, their technology, their culture, and their needs. This information would be crucial for helping Earth's scientists and leaders understand what kind of partnership was being offered. After several hours of discussion, Luna agreed to Elena's conditions, but she also shared some information that changed Elena's understanding of the situation entirely. Luna's people had actually been in secret contact with a small group of Earth's government officials for over a decade. The decision to make direct contact with individuals like Elena was part of the careful plan to prepare humanity for eventual official first contact. Elena learned that her online support group hadn't found each other by accident. Luna's people had been quietly guiding certain humans toward each other, creating a network of individuals who could serve as bridges between the species. When the time was right, Dr. Chen and the others were all part of this larger plan, though none of them had realized it until now. This revelation made Elena feel both honored and slightly manipulated. But Luna's emotional openness through their mental connection convinced her that the guidance had been given with genuine care and respect for human free will. Luna's people weren't trying to control humanity, but rather to gently prepare them for a relationship that could benefit both civilizations. The journey to Luna's ship was unlike anything Elena could have imagined. The interior was a beautiful blend of advanced technology and organic design, with walls that pulsed gently with living light and controls that responded to thought. As much as touch, Elena felt like she was inside a living creature rather than a machine, which wasn't far from the truth. Luna introduced Elena to 3 other members of her crew, each with their own area of expertise. There was a being whose name translated roughly to Star Singer, who served as their navigator and had spent decades mapping the galaxy. Another crew member, Memory Keeper, was responsible for recording and preserving the knowledge they gathered from different worlds. The third, Heart Healer, was their medical specialist and the one who would be responsible for Elena's health. During her stay, Elena's first few weeks aboard the ship were overwhelming but incredible. She learned that Luna's people call themselves something that roughly translated to Children of the Light, referring to their dependence on the energy of stars for both physical and spiritual sustenance. Their dying world wasn't just losing its suns, but was losing the source of everything that made their civilization possible. The ship itself was on a journey toward a distant star system, where Luna's people hoped to establish a new colony. Elena's presence would help them determine whether humans might be suitable partners for sharing worlds and resources. The decision would affect not just Earth, but potentially dozens of other worlds that Luna's people had identified as possible homes. During her time on the ship, Elena discovered that Luna's feelings for her went far beyond the professional relationship of diplomat and ambassador. Luna had never experienced the kind of emotional connection that humans called love, but her interactions with Elena had awakened something in her that was both wonderful and frightening. Elena found herself reciprocating these feelings in ways that surprised her. Despite the obvious differences between their species, she and Luna shared a deep intellectual and emotional bond that transcended physical form. They spent hours together, sharing memories, dreams, and hopes for the future of both their peoples. The most remarkable discovery came when Elena learned about the advanced medical technology that Luna's people had developed. They could indeed extend human lifespans dramatically, but more importantly, they had found ways to enhance human cognitive abilities without changing fundamental personality or identity. Elena volunteered to undergo some of these treatments, becoming the first human to benefit from alien medical science. These enhancements allowed Elena to process and remember vast amounts of information about Luna's civilization, making her an even more effective ambassador. She also gained the ability to communicate telepathically with Luna's people, though not as naturally as they did with each other. As her year aboard the ship neared its end, Elena had compiled an enormous amount of documentation about Luna's civilization. She had detailed records of their technology, their history, their culture, and most importantly, their genuine desire for peaceful cooperation with humanity. She also carried with her small samples of their medical treatments that Earth scientists could study and potentially replicate. But saying goodbye to Luna was the hardest thing Elena had ever done. Their relationship had grown into something that neither of their species had words to describe fully. It was love, friendship, professional partnership, and spiritual connection all combined into one powerful bond. Luna's final gift to Elena was a small device that would allow them to maintain limited telepathic contact across the vast distances of space. It wouldn't allow for detailed communication, but Elena would always be able to sense Luna's presence and emotional state, and Luna would know that Elena was safe and well on Earth. Elena returned to Earth with a carefully planned story about where she had been for the past year, with Dr. Chen's help and the support of the secret government officials, who had been expecting her return. Elena was gradually introduced to world leaders as humanity's first alien contact specialist. The process of revealing the truth about Luna's people to the world took several more years, but Elena's documentation and the proof she carried made the transition much smoother than anyone had expected. Humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization was announced as a peaceful, hopeful event rather than a crisis or invasion. Elena spent the rest of her extended life serving as Earth's primary liaison with Luna's people and, eventually, with several other alien civilizations they encountered. She never married or had children in the traditional sense, but she considered herself part of a much larger family that spanned multiple worlds and species. Years later, when Luna's people successfully established their new colony and began accepting human visitors, Elena was among the first to travel there. She and Luna were reunited in a moment that both of them had dreamed about for decades. Their love story became legend among both species, proving that understanding and affection could transcend any barrier, even the vast emptiness between stars. Elena's choice in that desert valley didn't just save Luna's people or advance human knowledge. It opened the door to a future where humanity would never again be alone in the universe, surrounded by friends and allies among the infinite stars.